Hi, my name is Steven Sohlstrom, and I invite you to read my new book, Shipwreck Stew and Other Recipes for Disaster. As the story goes, my mom went into labor with me while canoeing with my dad on Lewis Lake as a thunderstorm broke across the sky that Sunday afternoon, and while my current sailboat expedition was being built somewhere near Lake Erie by the Custom Flex factory in Toledo, Ohio. As a child dreaming of having my own sailboat, it was not to be for many more years. Feeling refreshed and having had a little exercise, I climbed back aboard and decided I would take a nap for the next few hours. My plan was to sail through the moonlit night up to Federal Dam and the next morning blow the entire 15-mile distance back to Walker. I crawled into the cabin and closed my eyes. I rolled over and closed my eyes again. I flipped over like a strip of bacon and now my eyes were wide open. This was not going to work. It was simply too hot. Even in the shade of the island and the cabin doors wide open, it was stifling. The heat index was over 100 degrees and the air extremely humid. I decided to get underway again. It was at this point the tone of the day began to change dramatically. I was just clearing the north tip of Bear Island and coming into full view of the lake to the west when the wind, which was coming from the southeast, completely disappeared. I could see one other boat on the water. There was a fishing boat with a couple of diehards out for an afternoon of trolling. I turned on my radios to check the weather forecast and get the local FM broadcast, which was coming from Bemidji. I wasn't getting signal on the phone, so I couldn't pick up the radar. What I saw next was completely fascinating. The water became as reflective as glass, in spite of it rippling about with waves that were fading quickly in the complete absence of wind. In the sky, at an extremely high altitude, a thin veil of cloud caused by updraft spilled into the ice-cold air above and spread like silver paint across the sky, slowly blotting out the sun. There was so much haze in the air that Ottertail Point, which was 5 miles away, was scarcely visible. Essentially, it appeared as if a silver veil was stretched between the water and the highest point in the sky. As I got out my camera to film and photograph the phenomenon, I could hear a very distant and persistent rumbling. It wasn't long before I also got out the map and began to search for the nearest marina. There was one seemingly within a few miles up the coast of Sugar Point. The glassy water began to move again. The dead calm was the moment of transition between a complete shift in wind direction. Now I was picking up a wind from the northwest, which was good because I really needed to get going. Even for lake time, I was a bit behind schedule. The thunder from the west began to get closer as I slowly moved up the coastline of Sugar Point. There have not been many occasions when I received a text message from my brother-in-law, who is a commercial pilot. "How's it going?" came a message from out of the blue. "I'm trying to outrun a storm," I replied. That would be the last communication my family would hear from me for a while. I figured that if I kept sailing to the north, I could carefully slip past the storm. I had no idea of the scale and ferocity of what was actually bearing down on the lake. Everything seemed dandy in Bemidji, and there was no clear warning of anything coming across the weather radio. I'd seen enough. I wanted off the lake. I could see a 30-foot sailboat ahead of us. The sailor was having trouble with his sails. I thought that was a little unusual for a sailor on a boat that size. Eventually his sails went up and the boat was under control again and he quickly exited the bay. I couldn't help but notice that the waves began to grow in scale as we crossed further into Trader's Bay. We can handle this, I thought, but the waves didn't stop there and continued to grow and grow. Okay, this is good enough. You can stop getting bigger now, but they just didn't. There was only a mile of open water between us and Rocky Point, but in the 20-knot blow, which was gusting past 25, the waves grew to a size I've never experienced before or since. Suddenly a gust of wind caught our solar panel, which was only held down to the deck by a bungee cord. It took a trajectory that would send it overboard, but Lissa reacted quickly and caught it. The panel was on the port side of the Mallard, but the waves and the wind were such that she had to stay on the starboard side or we risked heeling over too far. From the windward side, she held tightly to the bungee to keep it from being blown away again. This is where I first began to associate the necessity of patience and mental peace when sailing. There is no gas pedal that will get you to landfall on a faster time frame when under sail. The wind determines your schedule. You may as well leave your clock behind. Imagine if you had hundreds or thousands of miles to sail. You have to let go of that concept of control. You will get there when you get there. It's a peaceful feeling to give that up, but there are other emotional tolls that come with isolation for great lengths of time. It's important to have a healthy and resilient relationship with your mind. I dropped anchor and activated an app on my tablet that would set off an alarm if I happened to go adrift. Going adrift in the middle of the night would not be the best thing to awaken me from slumber. The worst case scenario would be that I would plummet over the dam a mile downstream. The more immediate danger would be trying to fit under the train bridge only a quarter of a mile away. There's only one response to wondering if that would work. It wouldn't. Upon catching the bridge, the boat would spin aft, and if it didn't begin to capsize in mid-turn, would plunge the bow into the water as the stern went up, likely flooding and sinking it if the mast didn't snap off by this point. It would be a very dangerous scenario. If I had given it much thought that night, I probably wouldn't have been able to sleep. The Mallard had been beached since Saturday and looked very cozy on the sand. Before casting off, I swapped electric outboards with my father in case I might run into trouble and need the extra power. My father gave me a push from the sand, and I let Expedition go adrift, knowing she would eventually be pushed further out by the wind. I had some trouble attaching the outboard, and just as I was about to lock it in place and raise the sail, we exited the lee of the western shore. A gust of wind took me by surprise and swiftly stole my ball cap, sending it into the lake. It made me think of Lys's hat and how we raced back around to pluck it out of Leech Lake. There was no way I could turn back and pluck the hat from the water this time. It was my favorite hat, but there was nothing I could do. The only direction the Mallard was rigged to sail that day was with the wind, and I couldn't go back. The cap filled with water and disappeared in the cold, dark lake. On our last sail of the season, Expedition was pulling with the spirit of a sled dog. We rolled atop the enormous waves with a bearing that would ensure our direct arrival at the public access. It was a one-take deal. If we missed, again, there was no going back.